Hey Tom, how you doing?
I am good, Matt. I am currently lying on a tattooist table about to get tattooed.
Okay, why?
It's kind of a very special occasion. We're here with some visiting artists from Jerusalem.
We're in Essex though.
Yeah, aka Hell.
How dare you?
Hell is probably better than Essex, I will say that much. It's wet. I mean, Malden.
Where the sea salt comes from.
Yeah, where the sea salt comes from. If you're listening to this, you're very welcome to Beneath the Skin, the show about the history of everything told through the history of tattooing. This is a first time for everything. I can start if you want.
Live episode.
A first time for everything. I'm going to be getting tattooed while we're interviewing someone.
Gonzo podcasting.
I am the Hunter S. Thompson of tattoo-based podcasting. So, I am Thomas Manny, and I'm joined as always by my esteemed co-host, Dr. Matt Lauder.
Hello. It's really good to be here. Maybe we should just ask our guests to introduce themselves. Like, tell us who you are.
Hello. So first of all, my name is Anton Razzouk. I am the 28th generation of the Razzouk family. My family has been tattooing for 700 years.
That's pretty good going.
Yeah, and we're in Essex now.
And what? Because your brother's about to start tattooing. Maybe you can introduce him as well.
Yes. So that's my brother. My brother's name is Nizar. He's also the 28th generation of this family. We're both basically on a small tour in UK so far, and yeah, he's currently tattooing.
Are you the older and wiser brother?
Older, yes. Wiser, not really sure about that. Yeah.
So we did an episode on the podcast before about the general history of pilgrimage tattooing. Your family name has been mentioned in passing, but I guess, I just love to talk to you both about, well, first, like, what are you doing here? Like, what brings you to Essex to start with?
What brings anyone to Essex?
What is a 28th generation tattooer doing in England?
We had the opportunity to go and tattoo in Glasgow before this. And so in Malden, actually, we have an ambassador, Mark, Skin Sorcerer here. This tattoo parlor
which is where we
our
are.
ambassador. And so we thought that we would come by, also see the area, see how, the Essex people deal with our tattoos and all that. And we thought it would be a great idea to come and visit and say hi.
Amazing. Yeah, Mark was just telling us that he sort of went on a pilgrimage of sorts to Jerusalem and met your dad and I guess met you guys, and then on a second trip over even briefly looked after the studio for a while. So there's clearly a kind of close relationship that you've got. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. We've worked with Mike with Mark before. I haven't personally because I wasn't really working at the shop back then. I was at school, but we've worked with him before. So
were you kind of like bred in a vat to be a tattooer? Like, was that always the thing that you both were going to be doing? Did your dad raise you to take over the business? I mean, there must be a lot of pressure. 28th generation.
I really wouldn't call that a pressure. I'll tell you why. Because even my dad himself, he didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, he didn't want to really do this. He was doing something else. And then once he got into it, he understood the blessing it is, and the responsibility to continue this ongoing tradition.
Yeah.
And then he passed it down to us. I didn't want to do it. Nizar probably wanted to do it. He's always been into tattooing in general. But look, man, when you hold a needle and when you start tattooing people and
100%.
listening to their stories, their backgrounds and all of this, and you are giving them their certificate of pilgrimage, that all by itself just pulls you to
It's probably like being a cop or a bouncer, in that people who want to do it probably shouldn't be allowed to, right? Like if you don't want to do it but you still do it, I think there's a kind of purity and honesty to that, and doing it for the right reasons. So when did you guys start tattooing?
I started tattooing about 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Nizar has been tattooing for 8-9 years.
Amazing.
now.
Amazing. And taught by your dad?
Taught by my dad, yes.
Yeah. And what was that like learning to tattoo in that? I mean, because it's a very, as you said, kind of, this is people coming on pilgrimage. Maybe for a lot of people it might be their first tattoo. Like, it's a very interesting and
most of our
very
customers
specific
are
place.
first-timers. Yeah, absolutely. How was it being taught by my dad? It would be the best experience, man, because he's not a stranger. He's not somebody. Yeah. So any kind of any kind of comment that comes from him, it's not coming from hate. It's coming from love, because he's your father and he's trying to make you into what he wants you to be.
Yeah.
Right. So I think because I know that he wants what's best for us. That
Yeah.
would be the best kind of teacher that you would ask for.
Yeah, and in the shop, as you said, like most of your customers, it'll be their first tattoo, maybe their only tattoo, right? So what kind of people have you got coming through?
So most of them are really elderly people. I'd
Really?
say 50 years
Interesting.
and above that, and it's their first time to the Holy Land, their first tattoo. They really would say to their sons and grandsons, "No tattoos, no tattoos," and they would come to us and they're like, "You know what? Maybe just once."
It's an exception made for,
Absolutely.
because I suppose when you talk about like pilgrimage tattooing, like traditionally, especially for your family, like, and we talked about it on a previous episode, like most people would have traditionally only made the pilgrimage once in their entire life. So obviously they're going to try and bring a little heirloom home. But like, I was going to ask, like, how has that kind of changed your family's relation to it now that like it's not necessarily a once in a lifetime trip that people can make, that they can come back and can get multiple tattoos?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what, when they come to us, they don't get it because the design looks good. They don't get it because they've been craving a tattoo. They get it to certify their pilgrimage, to go back home and to show all the other, friends and family that they have been to the Holy Land, and this is my proof that I have been there.
And that's what's so beautiful about it. And that was always what the function that tattoo served, right? Like, I sort of, when I talk about this stuff when I'm giving talks, I occasionally joke it's like, getting a tattoo on your bum if you go to Spain. But of course, it's not quite the same as that, really. Or it is that, but it's also something much more, which is exactly, as you said, this authorization of the pilgrimage experience. And I've been doing a lot of reading recently about where the tattoo stories start appearing in pilgrim narratives. And it's really interesting that some of the pilgrim narratives that were published in the late sort of 1500s didn't have tattoo stories, and then the second or third editions that come a bit later on, those tattoo stories are getting written in because it becomes such an important part of the narrative of pilgrimage in general. And it's so profound to me to think that you guys are still there doing that for people in exactly the same way that it's been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years, right? I mean, do people still take it very seriously?
Oh, absolutely. I think that they take it even more seriously now because, as you said, when they come to the Holy Land, they really don't think that they'll ever be back here ever again. So it's now or never. And then I think so, yes.
Yeah. And do you think that like people are surprised? I mean, presumably you might have customers who didn't even know that you were there, who were on their pilgrimages, and then they realize that this is an opportunity, and it's almost like something that they hadn't even thought they needed, and then right at that moment they have to do it, right?
We call those walk-ins, yes.
Walk-ins, yeah.
They just pass by the shop, they see the name, they see the since 1300s, they may Google it even, and then they come in, because our tattoo shop is not your typical tattoo parlor. It's more of a museum as well. So you go in, you see the history, you see the stamps, you see all the stuff, the articles, the books, the archives, the documents, and then they understand what this whole thing's about. So that gives them the motive to actually do the tattoo.
And again, that's been part of those pilgrim stories for hundreds of years. I mean, I know there are amazing stories from like the 19th century of pilgrims who come to Jerusalem, and I'm sure it's the same today to some degree, but certainly back in the 19th century when travelers were first going from a particular kind of social class from Britain, and they'd obviously heard about Jerusalem and read about it and heard about it in sermons their whole lives, and they went, and a lot of them were kind of surprised about how busy and how dirty and how commercialized it was even back then. But the tattoo became a part of resisting that kind of sense. It turned this place back into a magical, important place of pilgrimage for people, right? Rather than this kind of the reality of the modern day city. And I think, again, I get the impression that that's sort of where, as you said, you've got this walk-in shop that is at once tattoo shop and museum, contemporary and old. It sort of exists in this really timeless way that I find really fascinating.
Yeah, and like I think one thing that I really wanted to ask about is it's quite different in what we think of like with tattoos in terms of like most people think of stencils or acetates, and the fact that your family is using woodblock prints essentially, and that you have like original woodblocks from hundreds of years ago. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So those wood blocks, we call them stamps, and those stamps were passed on from one generation to the next in my family for the past 700 years. My ancestors hand carved these designs on olive wood, and they passed them down the generational line. Now, the reason they used to do these is because back in the day, obviously, they didn't have printers, Wi-Fi, whatever, all of that. So, yeah, so this was their way of... This is actually the original stencil. This is what a stencil
original
is.
flash, yeah,
Exactly.
almost.
So they would, hand carve it, and they would have it. So whenever anybody wants that design, they can just print it on them, really, and not just draw it all over again. Yeah. And this way, it's always the same... base model for every design. You have the design. This is your design. Would you like it? We will do it. That's what it is. And then, it's just passed down the generational line. And then today we still use those actual blocks.
And I think it's extra interesting as well. Like when we find like wood artifacts, particularly ones that are a couple of 100 years old, there's an interesting thing that the fact they're using as stamps for putting ink on the skin, that in some way maybe the ink is actually preserves the stamp rather than the other way around, because wood tends to, dry out and crack quite a lot, whereas the fact that you're using them all the time has probably preserved them for those hundreds of years.
Yes, so what we do, first of all, they're made from olive wood. Olive wood really preserves itself really well. And what we do is we take the stamps, we dip them in ink upside down, all sides of it. We just dip it in ink, take it out, and that way the ink really preserves the wood from just, fading.
And they're very black, look beautiful.
That's why they're
looking
black,
things.
yes.
Yeah. Are you still carving or having to carve new blocks?
So we've made new designs. We haven't made them into stamps yet because we're still altering the design itself. Our most recent actual stamp is a 100-year-old stamp from 1912. Now we've made a couple more as designs again, so we're still looking into making them into physical stamps. Yeah,
that's good. That's part of the the evolution of the design history as well, right? I mean, I think pretty much everything that anybody knows about this tattoo tradition, this Coptic tradition, comes from your family and the sharing of knowledge that your family did throughout the practice. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about where your family originally come from, or where these designs come from before they were such a kind of important part of Jerusalem?
Right. So first of all, my family is a Coptic family. Coptic is basically a denomination of Christianity, originally from Egypt. So my family basically started tattooing in Egypt, and then we stayed there for 200 years. We do have a lot of Coptic designs, such as the Lovin family design, the mermaid design. They're not necessarily religious. They're more Coptic designs that represent a specific meaning, right? The Lovin family represents the Lovin family, obviously. The mermaid has its own story, not really connected to religion. And then when my family moved to the Holy Land, the designs turned into more religious designs, such as the Jerusalem cross, such as the crucifixion, the resurrection, nativity, baptism, all of those events from the Bible. So you can see how they changed from traditional, cultural to religious tattoos.
Yeah, and do you think that relationship with that change, was that more so the demand of kind of moving to Jerusalem?
Absolutely.
That's what people wanted?
Absolutely, yes. When my family came to Jerusalem, they saw that pilgrims come here, they ask for religious
iconography,
items, stuff that they can take back home, and not necessarily cultural, but more religious. That's the thing. So that's why it turned into those designs.
I think any tattoo artist listening can relate to your family 700 years ago having to deal with walk-ins. And it's like, no, I want this. Can you do it? Yes or no?
You gotta say yes. You have to say yes, of course.
And presumably the busiest times for you now were still the busiest times for your ancestors, who were really busy around Easter time, and particularly
Easter is usually
moments
a busy
of
time,
high pilgrimage, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the reality, I guess, of running a tattoo shop in Jerusalem in the 21st century compared to like that much more kind of periodic? Because I think, am I right in saying that your certainly your grandfather was tattooing at busy periods and then doing other things a lot of the time as well, right?
Yeah. My grandfather, my great grandfather. So my grandfather was working. What I do remember is he used to work in a money change shop, and then he had a small station in the corner. He would tattoo pilgrims, Ethiopian pilgrims, African pilgrims, sometimes European and Americans, not always, because it wasn't your most sterile station. It wasn't your most professional shop. It was just a money change shop, really. And tattoos was kind of, a side business, but then again, it wasn't gone. It was still there in the family.
Yeah. And a sort of side business to end all side businesses, right? Because you end up kind of being the go-to person. And I mean, there are designs similar to the ones that you guys use on like Sudanese mummies, like back to the 8th century. Like this is even earlier than your family are working in this tradition. Like Christian tattooing is very, very old, and I always people are often surprised by that because they don't think religion and tattooing goes together very much. You must have people coming in and saying, I don't know, like I didn't know this was a part of Christian tradition.
We do have those. We do have a lot of them, but then again, we have a lot. Like we've tattooed a lot of priests and a lot of religious people, either Coptic, Catholic, or any kind of denomination of Christianity. We've tattooed a lot.
There's a good story, I'm sure you know it, from back in the 17th century of that Scottish pilgrim William Lithgow, who got his Jerusalem cross, but he asked the tattooer to add on the crown of King James, and then later on he was captured by the Spanish Inquisition spying in Spain, and they were so offended by the Jerusalem cross being next to this symbol of Protestantism that they put him on the rack and they cut the tattoo out of his arm. Because those really sort of internecine squabbles, if that's not a too mild a way of putting it, that happen in Jerusalem. I think like the fact that tattooing has always been at the centre of that, I find also really fascinating. Have you tattooed any? Do you have tattooed any Muslim pilgrims?
We did. Yeah. We did. Not a lot, but we've done a few tattoos on a lot of Muslims, Jews as well.
Of course, yeah. So yes. and Jewish people, because again, I think that's something that people find surprising, but of course, again, if you look at the history of this stuff, a very obvious thing that people are getting tattooed on them, the images that are meaningful to them, right? Yeah. Do you have to negotiate those conversations differently, or are they picking different designs?
Well, it really depends. Sometimes they have their own custom designs, a word, a date, maybe, you never know. Yeah. But we've had Jews who requested to get a Jerusalem cross tattooed on them, just because the design is that old and it just means so much. Not necessarily a religious meaning to them, but more of a history meaning to them. I was
so I just showed you my book. There's a image in there that I reproduce of that 17th century pilgrim with a Jerusalem cross on his arm, and I happened to be on my honeymoon in Puerto Rico, and the guy like serving us like burritos in this restaurant in Puerto Rico, this like 20-year-old kid on his arm, Jerusalem cross, the sort of classic, design. And I think that just speaks to that power of that image, right? You just see it everywhere.
Was that design done by us?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think he just sort of seen it on the internet, maybe. Right, yeah. Which is also...
Because we've had those incidents where we've met people in random places, in places that you'd never think of, and they would be like, Razzouk, I know you. You've done my tattoo, I don't know how many years ago. We've had a lot of those incidents happen to us, So I wouldn't be surprised in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, in the middle, literally in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah, if you can hear in the background, the tattooing is now stopped.
So I mean, so you got into all this a little bit earlier. You were keen.
Yes, I always wanted to be in the business. Since I was 10 years old.
Did your dad let you go and watch him tattooing when you were young?
Yes, I was always around my father, watching him tattooing people, and I always was the curious one and just want to know how it's done, because I like those things. And so a few years, 2-3 years passed just watching him tattooing, and he's like, why don't you start tattooing? I told him, well, I'm 13 years old. I'm too young to start tattooing.
Why not?
He's like,
why not?
Exactly. He's like, why not? I mean, what does that matter? Age is just a number. So I told him, okay, I mean, I have no problem to start. So he gave me a machine and a needle, and he told me, let's pick one of the blocks and tattoo it on me.
So, your first one was on him? Oh,
wow. So we took one of the stamps and we stamped it on him, on his leg. And that was my first tattoo I ever do. And it turned out pretty good, actually. Not the best tattoo, but it's good enough. And that was the start of the.
Yeah, and actually, a question I kind of want to ask as well, because obviously you just tattooed me with the machine. You mentioned machines. I assume, was your grandfather doing hand poke, or was he using machine eventually?
Okay, so my grandfather, he did use an electric machine.
Mm-hmm.
He used to do some stick and poke tattoos. My great grandfather used to to do stick and poke tattoos much more. But mostly actually electric tattoo machines, and that was a new thing back in the day. And they used to put signs outside the shop and saying electric tattoo machine.
yeah.
That was an important thing.
Selling point.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Some things never change no matter where you are in the world, because back then it was electric tattooing outside shops, even here.
Yes, that was an important thing, because back in the days, I mean, if people see electric tattoo machines, they would want to get a tattoo because they know it's the newer way and it's the faster way of getting the tattoos.
And kind of on that idea of technology as well, obviously your family is such an old business, and having to adapt to like the internet being around, not just only having to, you know, have social media and a presence online, but also, like you mentioned, seeing that cross in Puerto Rico is like people taking your designs and tattooing them, and yours is different obviously because there's a level of authentication, but like how is the business's relationship to that now?
I think that's such an interesting question.
Well, I mean, since we, like, from the beginning when we started, we really started doing those designs, and it was always so. They used to see those designs on a couple of places in Jerusalem, in Egypt, and they used to take those designs and collect those pictures and then do them. And that's why it's connected to the business, is because that's the core of how it really started. It really started from those type of things and those symbols.
Do you feel quite protective over them? I think I probably would if I was in your shoes.
Yes, of course. Of course, that's for sure.
Yeah. I think, I mean, as I said a second ago, I think like so much of all of the, you know, there's an amazing collection, a print book of your family stamp collection back in the 50s, which is really sort of anything anybody knows about these histories. And I think there's something really, again, really having read interviews and things with your dad, it's just, there's something really, a sense that you guys importantly understand, like that you're custodians of this story that otherwise becomes a bit, I mean, meaningless is too strong, right? But it's very easy to see a photo off the internet and copy something now. And I think there's something really interesting and important about this lineage, about this authenticity, about this travel, even about you guys coming here. You know, it feels like quite a kind of important thing. And I wonder if, how you guys feel about that.
About being protective over them, we are protective over the stamps themselves. Now the designs, look, with the age of social media, you can always just rip off anything,
that's
anytime,
true.
anywhere. It's just super easy to do so. But then again, if you do that, it's not really offending us. It's just you are taking away from the significance of it from your own self.
Right, that's right.
Right. So that's between you and yourself. We do offer them as designs to sell on our website. So we send you the design, we send you the measurements, and we send you a certificate of authenticity from us to do it wherever you want. This is one option. The other option would be an ambassador of ours, which is the closest thing to us because they're basically, you know, authorized by us to do those. And your third option would be us in Jerusalem. If you're ever in Jerusalem, that would be your best place to do it, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you want to stick to tradition, because our designs are more traditional anyway.
Yeah.
So if you want to stick to tradition, get the whole package. The more authentic you get it, the more meaningful it is for you.
And obviously, it's a family business as well. Is there any sibling rivalry between the two of you?
Now we're...
Not at all. No, we're one basically. It's me,
You're so
Nizar,
chill.
and my father. We work as one. So any one of us, you know, it just at the end of the day, it's the same guy. There's no rivalry. There's no, you know, conflict on who to do the tattoo first. Who does it better? I'll tell you, who does it better than I do. I can say that.
This is a
That's
very
fine.
diplomatic answer.
It's not like I have with my brother. So I did find really bizarrely the other day, mid 1700s in London, there was someone claiming to do the Jerusalem stamp. Like, so there were people ripping your family off like 200 years, 300 years ago.
It happened a couple of times here and there, you know.
And I suppose like a good point to end it on is like, as you know, you two are now like part of the family business as well, and soon probably you two will be the ones in charge of. What does the kind of future hold for, you know, your family?
So to be honest with you, how I see it is that I'm going to hold on this business, of course, my brother with me, and one of us eventually is gonna have a kid, and he's going to take over. And for me, I think that this is how it's going to be, because it's an honor to be born with such a family, having that history and doing tattoos for such a long time, and I think that should keep going as long
And
as
I'll
it
tell
can.
you what, if anything, it just makes it much easier because my father was the only one during his generation doing it. This generation has me and my brother, and we have a little sister. She's 9 still, but so we can
Only another 2 years until she starts doing it.
Well,
I guess
soon
so.
enough. But at the end of the day, it's just you've got more than one person holding this, and not just one person, right? So the weight distributes over
Yes.
more than one person, and that makes it easier, and that makes it even, I think, more global in a way, because we can be doing this all around the world while not leaving Jerusalem at all. So.
Yeah. There was this family of hotel owners in Japan, and they owned the longest, I think it was the longest ever business that's been in the family anywhere in the world, as far as I could tell. It was like 1,000 years old or something. And then like the last generation had a kid, and he was like, I don't want to run a fucking hotel. And they stopped, and they just took one person to like stop doing it, to like break that chain. And like
Yes.
you don't blame someone for that in the modern era. But to hear you guys talk about that in that way, I think that's such a really beautiful way of putting it. Because I think, as I said, one of the things I talk about a lot is how there's this big kind of sense that tattooing was discovered in the Pacific. And of course, like before Captain Cook set foot in Tahiti, like your family had been tattooing for several hundred years, right? And that story, like the story that of your family and of the tattooing in Jerusalem and of pilgrim tattooing more generally, is like a really interesting, important collective story of tattoo history that is foundational to everything that happened afterwards. And I think it's so important that it's still happening, because it says something important about the practice. And I hope I can come out to Jerusalem one day, because I'd love to.
Absolutely,
I'd love
we'd love
come
to have
out.
you guys in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I'd love to go.
It's a little warmer over there.
So, pissing it down with rain and 3 degrees here in Essex.
Once again, we are in hell, Essex.
How dare you?
Guys, thanks very much for
You're
coming on
welcome.
the
It's
show.
our
Thank you
pleasure.
so
Where
much.
can people find you online? Where can people find you in Jerusalem if they're there?
Well, we do have a website, we do have Instagram, all kinds of social media. Obviously, it's under Razzouk Tattoo name. And in Jerusalem, just search Razzouk Tattoo. You'll find us in the Old City.